Okay, it's recording. Well, okay. Since I don't want this meeting to go all night like the last meeting we had, what I'm going to do is start and let people catch up. Those people that come later catch up. This is the SteppIR information sharing teleconference for July, to follow up from the one in June. I did get responses back on the questions that we had. So we're going to go through those tonight. Let's see. Can everybody see the presentation? Yeah, good. Okay. So the meeting is going to last an hour or less. I know I said that last time, it didn't happen, but this time I'm going to try hard to do that. We're going to have introductions, but we're only going to have name and call. That's it. No more than 15 seconds. If you go 10 seconds. If you go any longer than that, I'll cut you off. I do have some responses to the questions and the discussion that we had from the June 29th meeting. Both John and Jeff Woolard sat down and they watched the presentation and then responded, sent me a 3 pages worth of stuff that we'll cover tonight. Once we get done with that, we can have a general discussion, and if we've got new questions or something else to record, we can put that in there. And then we'll try and figure out, I sent out a doodle poll. Everybody know what a doodle poll is? Okay, so there's a company that's got an online presence. You can do a number of things with the tools that they have on their website. One of them is set up polls for meetings that you can have people respond to. And in this case, what I did is I set up a whole week, all the hours in a whole week, and you can respond and pick as many of those hours out of that week as you can attend. Pick the ones that suit you, and it puts it into a big spreadsheet out there. You can see everybody's responses. And I'll probably close it in a couple of weeks. And then from that poll, I'll pick whatever is the best timing for the next meeting. I think that'll work better than what we're doing here. I don't know as this is the most convenient time for everyone. Anyway, and then we'll adjourn. So let's start in 10 seconds. Unmute yourself and give us your name and your call, and I'll start with Alan, N5NA.
Alan, N5NA.
Thank you, sir. Bill?
Oh, hi, this is Bill, WB6JJJ in Oregon.
Okay, glad to see you again, Bill. The other Bill, W5EP.
Yeah, WE5P, Bill, in Richmond, Kentucky, just south of Lexington.
Great, thanks. And David?
David, KK6US, San Jose, California.
Okay, great. We're going to, that was easy, quick. I'm glad we're through that. We're only 8 minutes into the meeting so far. That's good. Thanks for keeping that brief. So the next item on the agenda is to, work through the responses to the discussions. I should have really put discussions here rather than questions that we had on June 29th. And while John and Jeff both watched the presentation that we had, the meeting discussion, and I should say, obviously John is the CEO of SteppIR, and Jeff is one of the chief engineers at SteppIR. So I don't know if they watched it together or if they watched it apart and then put their heads together and responded to this. And Jeff is actually the one who sent me the responses. But anyway, let's start through this. One of the first things we talked about in the last meeting was, we've seen a lot of drive mechanism failures and spool shaft failures over the years. And there was a lot of discussion of using Delrin for as a replacement for those. I know myself, I've done this myself, taken just a solid Delrin rod and used the older style sprockets, and just you can pin them right on the Delrin, drill a hole in the bottom and stick it right on the shaft of the SteppIR motor or stepper motor, and it works fabulously. There's very little movement in the shaft because it's fairly brittle. Anyway, this is the response I got back from Jeff. He says, we've received our samples, and just to remind you, he did, after discussion with him, he said, yeah, he says, our other commercial antennas use, just Delrin shafts too. So we can just use Delrin shafts in the amateur antennas too. So he said that we've received our samples, and so far things are looking good. We had to add glass. I assume that's fiber to the part to keep dimensional stability. And remember, they're injecting this. When I built my shafts, I just used solid rod. They're injecting this, so they obviously, to keep the shaft, it keeps its dimensional stability, they're going to have to use some sort of a filler. They used the PC was 20% glass filled, and the sprocket shaft was PP 20% glass filled. The main issue I saw was the heat staking of the spool shaft onto the mounting plate. In other words, actually affixing it to the plate. I believe some changes to the process, some changes, we should be able to heat stick it without an issue. I plan on working on some destructive testing towards the end of the week to see the difference in strength between the older shafts and the newer ones. Once that's complete, I'll start doing cycle tests to see the longevity of both shafts. The one thing I do not have set up yet is fatigue testing, since the main failure mode of these shafts is fatigue over time. And yeah, I understand what he's saying. There's a bit of it's movement over time. It's oh God, there's a term for it in material science. Remember, plastic is a fluid. Okay, it seems like it's solid, but in actuality, it's a fluid. It's just like tar on a road. It looks like it's a hard material, but it's really not. It's a fluid that moves over time, and the higher the temperature, the more it moves. The same thing is true of these shafts. Since the main failure mode on these shafts is fatigue over time, I think it would be a really good idea to set up a fixture and cycle, to cycle load. It says to cycle loading. I think he means cycle load on each shaft. This will take me a bit of time to set up the fixture and would be greatly beneficial to SteppIR and its customers. Okay. It says, since SteppIR has not seen an issue with either shaft since pre-2016, I'm curious to see the results comparing the two different materials. We suspect that we would switch to Delrin either way, as there's quite a bit of negative outlooks on both shafts, even though we have improved it over the years. If we do not make the switch, we will go with the white Delrin to clearly show. No, if we do make the switch, we'll go with the white Delrin to clearly show the material change, and that's good news. I think that's a smart thing to do. That way, you don't have to guess what version of the shafts you got. One question I have for the IO group, which is you guys, is let's see, if there are any customers out there that have had shafts fail on the EHU post 2016, if they can check the written date, serial number on the EHU, or send a picture of the serial number and shaft to SteppIR. This would clear up a lot of confusion, not only for SteppIR, but for the IO group and the customers as well. And as it turns out, I've got one. I've got a split shaft. I buy up, EHUs when they become available, and refurbish them, mostly to use for my own personal antennas. But I've got a bunch of split shafts. I've got one that's got a broken reel shaft, and I'll send all that stuff to them. I've also got, we're going to find out later in the presentation, that they responded on cracked EHUs, and I've got 5 cracked EHUs, and they're not cracked where they think they are. They think they're cracked around the base, by over tightening the nuts. Oh no, mine are cracked right where the elements go into the into the housing, and I'm going to send them all of those, and they can do what they want with them. Okay, any feedback, any question on this? It sound good? Okay, let's go to the next one then. Yeah, EHU internal mounting plate failures. Okay, and I remember we had the guy, man, I forget his name, from the last meeting, and he was in the process of making a Delrin internal plate for his EHU because he was having so many issues with the ones he had. Jeff says, I've only seen a handful of failures of the internal mounting plate. They were always associated with a different failure, which then caused excessive force on the plate and therefore cracking the mounting plate. And I suppose what he's meaning is either somehow one of those take-up reels got loose, shaft broke off, and then other forceful issues occurred inside the EHU. I hear one customer on the presentation mentioned they made a Delrin mounting plate as well. Are there any other customers who have experienced failure, damage, or mounting of a mounting plate? If so, it would be great to know how many. The failure mode, did the plate just crack, or was there another failure that led to the cracking of the plate? And the production date, either written on the serial number sticker or serial number itself. I don't know. Is this a real common failure mode? I know a couple of people have seen it. I've seen it myself, but I think it's really rare, to be honest. How about, have any of you seen this? No? Yeah, I didn't think so. Any questions or anything to feedback? Okay. Let's move on to the next one. SDA 100 firmware update. Jeff says, I've not yet looked into this myself, as we've had a handful of other high priority projects that he's trying to complete. I will be having our software development investigate this once she finishes the 2 projects she's currently working on. The Optimizer 2 will have an incredibly simple firmware software update, as the bootloader will be embedded in the controller. Yeah, like every microprocessor these days, the bootloader is embedded in the controller. It will be as simple as plugging the controller USB port into your computer and dragging a file over and essentially dropping it into the controller, and it'll update the controller. Okay, that's great, but it doesn't address the hundreds and hundreds of SDA 100 controllers that are out there that need firmware updates. Okay. And that was really the point of the question. That's great that we're working on a new easy to use controller. But right now there are lots of SDA 100 controllers out there that are very expensive. Okay. And some of them without firmware update are virtually useless to the user. Okay, so I think this needs a little bit more priority from them. Does anybody disagree with that? No? Yeah, just to get this off of their back, and this has been a problem ever since they released the control. Well, ever since Windows 7 or whatever went out of print, so to speak. And so you can't really make that firmware upload. Anyway, I'm going to feed back to them that I think this is higher priority than what they think, for a number of different reasons. Mostly because there are a lot of expensive, SDA 100 controllers that are sitting out there that are, to some people, virtually useless without the firmware upgrades. Any feedback? Okay.
Not particularly, but I've always been curious because the business plan and their business plan is intriguing. But for something like the SDA 100 and the older, is there a point where they would consider just going open source and letting someone second source a controller that's upgradable and even play withable?
Yeah, I wondered that myself, but I've always been a little bit hesitant. I mean, I have a replacement controller myself. Okay, I have my own controller, and I haven't actually released it to the public because I don't want to be in competition with SteppIR. Okay, I believe that it's in our best interest to let them develop their products as fully as they can with their team, rather than me trying to undercut them, right? Because my controller you can put together for under $100. Okay, it's a little bit embarrassing, and it works as well as the SDA 2000 or better. I mean, it's the modules, the SteppIR modules are replaceable in seconds. You can pull one out, throw it away, and plug in another one, and they're only a few bucks. Rather than trying to track down 6219 chips. Well, anyway, so what I'm going to feed back to them, like I said, is I think this is higher priority than what they think, because I've got I've got 3 SDA 100s sitting on a shelf that aren't doing anything, just because I can't upgrade the firmware in them. All right. Any other comment on this one? No. Okay, SteppIR controllers in general. They just fed this back. I think the discussion we had was upgrading the SDA 100, the discussion last time, and the fact that they did away with the SD cards mechanism on the SDA 2000. And in my view, that was the only reason to buy the SDA 2000, was to be able to upgrade the models and build your own models for your own antennas. Okay. I mean, you can sort of still do that, because you can go in and you can play with the dimensions on each band for the antennas, but you can't save a bunch of different antennas then, all right? Because there's nowhere to save them. And I do this all the time. I build a number of different antennas. I build them for DXing. I build it for different contests. I build different antennas. And it's very advantageous, because I can, for different types of contests, I can keep a real tight, narrow beam width if it's just say a strictly North American contest, or I can open it up so that the beam width, so that I can get both Europe and the United States, or all of South America, or something like that. I love that the antenna can do that, and I think they're really downplaying one of the big features of the antenna by doing something like this. Anyway, what he says is all SteppIR controllers, hardware and software, were designed by Jim Thomas and Mike. They're all assembled by us, SteppIR. The printed circuit board assemblies are made by vendors. I do agree that there are plenty of improvements to be made in our controllers. We're working towards that goal. You know, one of the things that I suggested is that stop with this foolishness of adding all these, you know, if you want the lockout, you got to buy that, or the relay board and all of that. That's a bunch of baloney. You know, it costs them $5 to put those parts on the circuit boards. Trust me, I know. So why wouldn't you just stock one controller? And I think that's what we fed back to them last time. The Optimizer 2 is the first step in an updated display board with expanded capabilities. The next step will be an all-new controller with a completely redesigned driver board, display board, transceiver interface board, and relay board, most likely consolidated into a single PCB. Okay, that's good, because that means that all of the options are probably going to be there. We hope to start the project once production on the first batch of Optimizer 2s is completed. The all-new controller will be a substantial project. Will take quite some time for SteppIR to complete this. We have no estimated completion date at this time, as we have not yet started on the R&D project on this. Yeah. My SteppIR compatible controller uses a Teensy. So it's got a lot of power and does a lot of things. I can also, you know, hook it up to an HDMI output, so you can see it on a TV screen or that sort of thing, if you like to do that. But I don't know. I may talk to him about helping him out with this a little bit. And actually, maybe there's some room for us to put together some functional specs. Them, okay?
That's
Meaning,
what I was going to say is, what's their specs? And I think we could really help them evolve a needed product.
you know what? I think so too. And I think that would be welcome from them. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of things that they haven't thought of, you know.
Hey, Bill, this is
Yes.
Bill. It's JJJ. I've got to step away, unfortunately, and go to a farm to help, but I will look at the recording when you do it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussion before we move on? Okay, let's go to the next one. EHU brush contact. He wrote a lot of words here. You know, he says, I'd like to reiterate that the current design of the EHU brush, contact brush, was deliberately designed not to have contacts that sit completely flush on the copper tape, to utilize the entirety of the contact throughout its life. Okay, that's an interesting concept, but I still think you can do both. I think if you've got a full contact flush of the bottom button with the beryllium element, I think it's going to last longer than if you tilt it and it's just a piece of it is touching the element. I don't know that for sure, but I can do the geometry and figure that out, and I think that would be the case, because as you wear the brush out, you get closer, and the holder for the brush gets closer and closer to the beryllium, and once it touches it, you want to be changing it out anyway. And that's going to happen sooner if it's tilted rather than later if it's parallel to the element. Anyway, I mean, this is just a simple geometry issue. He says, this brush design was tested extensively over a 2-year period to find a happy medium between friction, usable life of the contact, power handling capability. There's no design flaw with the EHU contact brush as our test data that we have checked all 3 boxes: friction, usable life, power handling capability. This is also backed with thousands of units out in the field, both in the amateur radio market and the commercial markets. Okay, who knew, right? So maybe we let this one go and let's see what happens with it. I don't know. I'll let you guys speak, but I mean, maybe they've solved this. I guess only time will tell, huh? SteppIR does have test data showing improvements on the contact brush, reducing friction, and has commercial customers data showing current carrying capability of the EHU brushes hold safely to 4 to 5 kilowatt, even with a small contact surface between the contact and the copper element. Of course, this is frequency dependent, you know, and it depends on how close to resonance you are. If it's completely resonant, you've got maximum lowest resistance and maximum current. Makes complete sense. If you deviate from that, maybe not so much. Let's see. Not only do we have this data, but we have lifetime cycle data that's showing the longevity of the contact brush in comparison to the previous design. Power handling data fortunately cannot be shared due to active NDAs with the customers. Read that, the government. But the friction and life cycle time cycler data can be shared. That would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah, and maybe that would be, you know, even if it's just in the form of, hey, you know what, your brushes are going to last at least X years with normal amount of wear. I mean, that would give you a kind of an idea of when you need to take your antenna down and do some maintenance. You know, maybe you need to do maintenance every 5 years, and we don't even know that. So it's kind of data that maybe we could have shared. I guess we'll talk to them about that. I have not had any chance to work on changing the secondary angle to increase the contact surface between the contact and the copper element, as it is not the highest priority. Okay, so I guess further up he was talking about the bend of the brushes as they exist on the holder. I would think that the contact with the maximum surface would be ideal, but I don't know. Maybe they have data that tells them something else. Changing the secondary angle is only on our project list as we're reacting to customer IO group opinion to eliminate concerned doubts of current design. As soon as our active projects are complete, I will start on this project. I suspect I can start looking at this within the next month or so. Okay, that's good. Since there's not a lot of issue with the current carrying capability of the current brush contact design, we plan to release an updated version 2, and we'll offer exchanges for customers who have purchased version 1. Well, that's neat. I guess that's kind of like a warranty kind of thing. But we have yet to install. Well, you know, I think people are going to do this anyway. I've got a set sitting in stock right now that I'll send back. It says we just ask that the customer pays for the shipping of the new version 2 and sends us their version 1 units back. Seems fair. Any comments? Okay. In our meeting, we talked a little bit about the verticals, our last meeting, and the loading coil associating with the verticals. And there were a lot of burned up coil issues, bad contacts, and that sort of thing that came out of that. Jeff says the changes made to the SteppIR loading coil, the changes were mainly focused on reducing areas that high voltage could arc. Okay, so they weren't worried about the current, and I still think that's a problem then. We first attempted to reduce the voltage in the coil, and after several attempts found it difficult to accomplish. Yeah, of course, that's just physics. You know, that's just physics. You're not going to get away from the high voltages associated with the coil. What you need to do is you need to make stiffer or stouter contacts. You know, this is interesting. I worked on a project once where we had an issue like this, and what we did is we took contacts. We had a circuit board switch, and we took silver plated contacts and we soldered them onto the area on the circuit board that we're going to make contact with the wiper. So when the wiper got close, it actually went into the contact and, you know, actually had a contact to land on that. It worked really well. I'll bet those contacts are still available. I should probably turn those guys onto those things. Anyway. SteppIR has created more air gaps in the coil between the inductance coil taps to ground to reduce the chance of arcing. We also have grounded all edges on the tap positions and made sure the trace edges are smooth instead of pointed and sharp. You know, that's good for the high voltage, but it isn't any good for the current. We made a single coil at a customer's request, okay, that uses a Teflon spacer block between the stepper motor and the balun to reduce the chance of heating and melting the stepper motor windings to one another. Okay, so I think this is what was brought up in the last meeting, and we saw a picture of that piece of Teflon that was between the motor and the rest of the hardware. Since the pocket for the motor balun is so small, it causes the balun to be pushed up against the motor, which eventually causes the stepper motor to heat up to extreme temperatures and melt the windings on the stepper motor. Wow. Okay, this is not in production, as we've only seen this happen to this specific customer. In the future, we plan to change our mold to create a larger pocket for the motor and the balun to allow for a larger air gap between the two. Okay, that's smart. I still think there's some room for improvement of the switch, though. Any discussion or feedback on this one? Okay. 7:37. We're doing well on time. Let's go to the next one. The stealth flagpole version of the small IR. So Jeff fed back. We talked about this a little bit and its design. The stealth IR is designed complete with its first prototype at MyQTH. Oh, so Jeff's actually using it. Performance is extremely similar to that of a small IR, minor differences due to the dielectric of the fiberglass pole. Okay. Stiffer, I guess, if you're going to call it a flagpole, so that you can put a flag on it. And we hope it will assist customers living in HOAs around the country. Its total height is 19 feet, just under 20 feet to stay within the Florida state law of HOA flagpoles. Now, mine here is 25 feet, so I could use a bigger one. And I know I've got a buddy that lives in one that's 33 feet, so 35 feet, I think. Let's say its total height is, and it is all hidden within an extra large architectural rock. The product can be found and purchased here, and then he gave me the link. It says, I'm currently working on the assembly manual and hope to have it completed within the next week or so. We will ship the first units within the next 2 weeks, and it will be reviewed by ARRL. Okay, that's kind of cool. So glad to see that they're still putting out new products, right? Any discussion? Does anybody think they're gonna buy one of these by chance? No? Okay, any other discussion or questions before we move on? Okay, let's move on. EHU shell cracking. Okay. We had a big discussion about this at our last meeting. There's been a talk about SteppIR EHU shell cracking. And here at SteppIR, we have attempted to recreate this issue to no avail. Well, they're going to get 5 of them in the mail from me, and they'll be able to see where the cracks are. My EHUs were on my DB42 in a hurricane, and the wind never got above 40 miles an hour. All right. Yet the housing, all 5 of the housings were busted. All right. So they're going to get a firsthand experience with this. The only cracking we have ever been able to recreate is due to high impact or extreme over tightening of the mounting bolts. And I've seen that too. I mean, I've purchased EHUs, you know, bad EHUs to fix, and I've seen where guys have way over tightened the the screws to the mounting plates. And I understand how that can happen. I've also, I got to say that on mine, I've taken my antenna down and found, the housing's a little bit loose on the mounting plate. That's happened too. But they do have a solution here. I think it's a good one. They say the 18 SS 1032 screws are rated at a torque spec of 31.7 pounds, inch pounds, or 2.64 foot pounds. Many customers are exceeding this during the installation, which results in a cracking of the EHU shells. And I don't doubt that at all. They should publish that damn spec though in the manual, so that people don't over tighten their EHUs to the plates. Again, I think because most of us know about this, there's a tendency to under tighten them. Because as you're tightening them up, you're also compressing the gasket. Then over time, the gasket further compresses, and now all of a sudden it's loose again. And that's why the last time that I put up an antenna, I tightened it up and I left the antenna down for a month, and then I went out and retightened everything to make sure everything was copacetic before it went back up. Anyway, he says many customers are exceeding this during install, which results in cracking the EHUs. To mitigate the over tightening of the bolts by customers, SteppIR has designed a washer strap that will be installed over the EHU flange to distribute the forces more evenly across the entirety of the EHU flange. And I've done this myself. I've made my own gaskets, aluminum flanges that go over the EHUs. That's a great way to do this, right? And I'm glad to see them do this. This will completely eliminate any of the cracking. Not only that, but there'll be constant pressure, not just at the screw holes, but all the way around the EHU to hold it down to the base plate. And I think that'll be fantastic. I think that'll be a great design. Another possibility is over time, cyclical loading vibrations are causing cracking. Well, I think that's what I saw. SteppIR is working on a solution to this as well, and we'll release more information about it as we finish the test phase and start on the production phase. Okay. Like I say, I've got 5 of them. I'm going to send them to them, and they can do with them what they want. They can examine them. But those cracks are not where they think they are. Okay. Any other discussion here? This was actually a pretty good topic. All right. Yeah. SteppIR product testing. I know we had a sort of a big discussion of SteppIR product testing in our last meeting, and wondering, because none of us have ever seen any data. They don't put like white papers out on their website, which they should. I mean, of course it takes time to do this, but you know, if they're working with us, you know, like if they were to work with me on EHU failures, you know, plastic housing failures, and I worked with them and we got to a point where something worked, I would ask them, I would say, hey, do you mind, you know, can I take the data and write this up and you could use it as a white paper and stick it on your website? And I may ask them if they might do some more of that kind of stuff, because that'll help them out. That'll get them out of, you know, I think they're manpower limited. Obviously they are, their company. They're trying to get products out and solve as many of the high priority problems as they can. But, you know, some of the things they just don't have time for. But, you know, if we've got time to do that, you know, a guy like me, I'm an engineer. I got no problem doing that. Let's see, SteppIR product testing. Since first day SteppIR has released a product. Oh, since the first day SteppIR released a product. That's an odd sentence. They've done extensive testing on each and every design, manufacturing process, and final product. Depending on the product, SteppIR does some combination, accelerated life testing, destructive testing, cyclic fatigue testing, Q&A, A/B testing, user testing, regression testing of each product. Test data is collected and stored in SteppIR's database, will occasionally be released to the public. Okay. And I can understand why they don't release a lot of the data. I mean, they've got, you know, there's a couple of companies over in Europe now that are producing a similar type, you know, antenna design. And I understand why they don't want to release the data. And I'm all in on that. Okay. It's just that when certain things, you have to weigh the benefit versus keeping things secret sometimes. For some of the stuff, their competitors have already figured that out. And if their competitors have figured it out, there's no reason why they shouldn't release data for a better design of their own product. Okay. I hope I made sense of what I just said. Okay. He says we take great pride in our products, and while there's room for improvements, that comes at a cost. We all know that. SteppIR does its best in creating a product that not only performs better than any of the other products on the market, but is also reasonably priced for amateurs on the radio market. SteppIR expands its capabilities, the price of the product also increases. Yeah. While we would like to make a bulletproof antenna system for the amateur market that will survive for decades, many of our antennas have survived almost 2 decades without a hiccup. That comes with a heavy price to pay for the customer. Yeah, and I've been involved in, you know, product development for the military as well, and I can tell you that it's far cheaper for you to do all of the things that they say: fatigue testing, cyclical, destructive testing, life cycle testing, all of that stuff in-house, find the absolute best design, even get some betas involved, and then release it, rather than releasing something and then letting your people on the street find it. That's a disaster. Okay. I mean, you know, and I'll mention one of them, and that's that return design. Okay. The original return design for the 40 millimeter elements, for a lot of people, that's going to continue to be a problem, and they probably should have tested that for a few more years without releasing it, you know, to find the right design. Anyway, let's see. It comes with a heavy price to pay for by the customer. Yeah. Well, you know, you got to weigh. You got to weigh that against how your customers feel about your product when they fail too. All right, and that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think that, you know, releasing the test data itself, it would be of some engineering interest, but not really of any use to, the general amateur user. But if they really could kind of summarize this in a general philosophy or what they're really doing in terms of their their derived environments and their design margins proven by tests over those environments. That's really what the point of testing is to make sure you have the lifetime that you expect analytically. So if they can kind of explain that most things are 2.5 or 5 times over design margins, and you're spending this kind of amount of money, that gives you some feeling, and probably is understandable by people spending that amount of money.
Sure.
But just showing me what they're how many cycles of testing, unless I know the actual environmental requirements at 100 feet or 45 feet. Yeah. So I think they could really summarize this in terms of a corporate philosophy of design margins and testing.
Right. I know, I completely agree with you. Something as simple as, well, we know our EHUs we've tested, we've got 2 years worth of data. We know that our EHU designs are good to 75 miles an hour and, constant wind.
Yeah. I mean, the real analogy is the easy one to understand is pressure vessel overpressure testing.
Mm.
All the environments, there's
Yeah, of course.
some design margin that they could just say.
Or compression in a submarine. Yeah. Okay. Or yeah, cycling. The airline industry they're really good at this. They have to be, because we're talking about lives. Okay. Any other discussion of this one? Product testing. This is a really good one. I think we probably ought to talk about this again in our next. If you had one thing that you would like to see them give us some data on, what would that be? Anybody? I can speak for myself. I mean, there are a number of things that I'd like to see, but I lost a boom on my antenna, that the one that's behind me up here on the on my picture that I've got up on the screen. I lost the boom on that thing, and it was at a very low wind load in a hurricane. It was around 40 miles an hour, and what had happened is I pointed the antenna into the wind, and they're trussing. What they don't tell you about this trussing is the wind can pick the trussing up and twist the antenna. Okay. And because of the design of the trussing, it actually literally helps the wind twist and bend the antenna. All right. A better design would be to truss above and below. If you did that, it wouldn't do that. It wouldn't be able to pick the antenna up and twist it. And I don't think they've got any data on this. I don't think they've ever thought of it, to be honest. But it happened to me, and I've since put some additional trussing on the antenna. I mean, just a double set, one on the top, one on the bottom. It's simple to do. Just order the extra parts from SteppIR, and it's going to save me. And of course, you can't just buy a single section of that boom. You have to buy the whole boom, and that boom was $1,000. Okay. Anything else? I mean, is there anything that you guys would like to see?
Just to have at least one comment. Frankly, my interest is more electrical. And I'm kind of in the degenerate customer group, being an Urban Beam user. So, but we're the independent groups are doing a lot of modeling that's available.
Oh yeah.
That's just to get SteppIR in the loop on that would be my interest, and to this, not as much mechanical.
Well, okay, so when you say modeling, you're talking about electrical modeling, right? So, um, neck 2, neck 4 type stuff. So, it's interesting. I've modeled all of the SteppIR antennas myself. I mean, that's my specialty. I do antenna modeling. If you guys haven't figured that out on the forum, I've done it for the government. I've done it for, I was one of the peer reviewers for neck 2 when it first came out. Uh, I was at Lawrence Livermore at the time. Anyway, so the Urban Beam is one of the only SteppIR antennas that I haven't modeled yet. And yeah, so I don't know, maybe that's something that I need to put on my
Yeah, and it's in my to-do list for the neck
Yeah.
modeling. Look into it. I haven't. And frankly, for all these, I'm really interested. Given the fixed element spacing, what's actually the achievable degrees of freedom? What can you really do? And again, I suspect it's pretty minimal for the Urban Beam. But yeah, so the mechanical product things we were discussing, I think it's really just helping them make a convincing proof that given this amount of money, there's margins. Because
Sure.
all the forum people reading it get horror stories of what's going on. So what's really the margins? And just shifting gears like I just did, I think
Right.
more information would be the electrical. And then we're right back to controllers and flexibility and what you
Exactly.
could turn it into an amateur playtime.
Exactly. You know what? I've got a number of fascinations. I tell you guys about this. I actually have a EHUs built that have feedback in them. An extra set of optical encoders that that sit around the holes, and it counts holes, so it can tell if a element stalls or not. I know SteppIR doesn't want to do that, and I'm not sure there's any need to do it, but I got a lot of good data back by doing that. It told me right away that the elements, unless you're in a cold part of the country where your elements can actually freeze due to moisture inside the elements. The issues that we're seeing with the 40 meter elements have nothing to do with stalling as you think. I would probably say, some of the boom data I'd like to see, and maybe I don't know. I guess I don't know I guess they've released their models, their antenna models. And and if they haven't, it's pretty trivial. You can get them out of the controller, so it's not a big deal, I guess. Anyway, anything else before we move on? Okay, let's. This was curious. There was a whole big discussion over the updated instructions for the returns, the new returns. And there wasn't a lot of discussion of how so many people had so many questions about those instructions. Okay. And I think we probably ought to drive that home again, how those instructions need to be updated, and they need here are the issues from last time. One is a lot people are confused on how to put the clamps on, how tight to put the clamps, and where on the element to put the clamps. Now, me personally, the first set that I had, I put over. I did this long before they put heat shrink tubing on the returns. I did this myself. I put heat shrink tubing on the returns, and I put the clamps over the heat shrink tubing, but yet not on the poly part of the connection. I put it on I put them on top of the fiberglass tube part of the connection, so you couldn't smash the tubing. Okay, and that seemed to work great. Since then, on the last time I took the antenna down, I moved the clamps up a little bit, in a little bit further towards the boom, because there's no reason to have it. I mean, versus being out further or in closer, I don't think it makes any difference. It just keeps it off the heat shrink tubing, so you don't have to, you know, squish the heck out of it trying to close it, trying to close a clamp. They've got a little bit, you know, the instructions right now tell you to put where to put the clamp, and it says to, you know, keep sort of a certain gap between each half of the clamp. Not sure that's really as useful as it should be. I think, you know, closing the clamp and having it just a little bit further in on the fiberglass tube is probably a better deal, because everybody knows what that's going to be. Close it tight on the fiberglass. Anyway, with that said, I think the new returns, I haven't heard anyone complain about it. Meaning, since the new return, of course, now we don't have a lot of experience with them, but I haven't heard anybody complain about them and have issues with the elements stalling now that's come out. Have you guys tried any of those kits? I mean, nobody's tried those. So I've got a set of the kits. I'm going to put them on my I've got my DB42 down for service right now, and I'm going to put those kits on my DB42, and I'll be putting it up in September. So we'll see how well that goes. I may make notes on the instructions and send those back to SteppIR, but a lot of people complained about the instructions. I think it's worthwhile for them to probably put some effort into cleaning those up a little bit. Okay. Any more discussion on that? Any input? Okay, let's move on to the next. What else? What other questions do we have? What other things are burning in your mind that we'd like to have answered from SteppIR?
I conveniently inserted my thoughts a few moments ago, so
It's good. Well, I've still got a little bit of sidecar left, so. Okay, so is there anything? I guess we should also ask, what does SteppIR want to hear from this group? And I'm going to ask that in the forum here, and they can feed that back. Okay, they can feed back. Yeah, they can tell me, and we can talk about it in the next meeting. Okay. So we're getting towards the end of the meeting. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we leave?
Hey, Bill, with the topic you just mentioned, the thought just came to me, you know, within the forum, within this group, there's probably a very wide variety of interests and experience. So, you know, because part of their SteppIR's motivation would be if there's a bunch of, you know, retired engineers that they could get some free help from.
Exactly.
Maybe if you could survey the group and kind of give that as a stimulus, because they're getting either, you know, product survey from the general amateurs, and then maybe some interesting potential of free help from the other more experienced part of the group.
Okay. That's a great suggestion. Thanks for doing that, for making that. Yeah, I know we've got people from all different kind of walks of life. We've got material people that could help with, you know, things like structural design. We've got electrical engineers that can help with the EE parts of it. We got material people that can help with the material parts of this. Yeah, that's really smart. And you know, myself, yeah, I'm retired, but I still own an engineering business, so I still do that. But I still like to help them out too, because I like to see them succeed. Okay. And I have selfish reasons for that. Or at my contest station in the Caribbean, I can only have one antenna up. That's a government regulation. Okay. So it's in my best interest to make the single antenna that I have, their antenna, work as well as I can get it to work. Okay. So it's a little selfish on my part, but I do want it to succeed. Anything else?
Yeah, make sure the viewers of the recording have a good idea of how to feedback answers to the questions you're making or giving out right now.
Okay.
So because there may be a lot of good input there.
Yeah. Thanks for suggesting that. I think probably they're going to see this out on YouTube, and I'll turn on the comments on YouTube so they can feedback there. They can also send either feedback to the SteppIR IO group generally for discussion by everyone, or they can send it to me individually, and I'll add it to the list. All three of those are good options. Probably the best is to feed it back to the SteppIR group, though, so that everybody gets to see it. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, for the next meeting date and time, I picked the last full week of August, and I sent out a doodle poll. If you guys didn't see the doodle poll, hit me up in the groups.io group, and I'll send that out again. Don't blow that off. Use the link, go out to the poll, and just say yes to the times that you think you'd be available, and basis the highest percentage of whatever hour gets the highest percentage. I'm going to we'll use as our next meeting time. I'm also thinking about maybe doing I'm a night owl, so I don't mind doing this, is doing one that's in the middle of the evening for the folks that aren't in the United States. Okay, so we can cover Australia and Europe. I don't have any problem doing a second meeting just for that, if the need be. Okay. Anything else before we adjourn? Okay, well, with that, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you at the next meeting. If you've got any feedback in the interim, please let me know. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.